Welcome to All Angles, a college admissions podcast by Comet, the podcast that helps you crack the code to college admissions and make informed decisions about your future. With our unique approach of exploring all angles, we delve deep into the complex and multifaceted world of college. Our show features expert advice, real world experiences, and valuable tips and strategies to help you not only get into college, but also succeed academically, socially, and professionally. Join us for straight talk interviews with admissions experts, hiring managers, and discussions with college students on a wide range of topics to their academic and social experience. From tips on writing an outstanding personal statement to what current college students wish they knew before applying, it's our mission to empower you with confidence, tools and resources, and the right perspectives to take it to the next level. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing how you can select a major and the importance of choosing a major and the impact that it has on your college experience and future career. This episode is about admission strategies and figuring out which colleges accept which majors and how different majors can increase or decrease your chances of getting into a particular university. So we're excited to feature Elton, our guest speaker today on the podcast. Elton, would you like to go ahead and share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Shania, thanks for letting me be on the show again. Appreciate it. So a little bit of a quick intro. My name is Elton Lin. I am the CEO and co-founder of Comet and also the CEO and founder of Illumin Education. I've been doing college advising for students for the last 12 years and have advise students on all forms of majors, and students that myself and our team has worked with has been admitted to every top 50 university, including every Ivy League. And so we've seen a lot of students, seen a lot of different profiles, understand how the major selection has changed the admissions landscape especially over the course of the last few years. And so excited to share a little bit more about how that matters and how students should choose majors.
Yeah, awesome. I am definitely very interested to kind of explore the different topics relating to how your major can impact your chances of admission. And I think, going from personal experience, like as a student who applied as a computer science major, there was definitely a lot of talk that when you're applying for CS or, an engineering or STEM major, you are effectively cutting your admission rate like in half, maybe, or maybe even more, depending on the college. So I've heard that if you apply for a particular major, maybe one that's like less sought after or less competitive, it can increase your chances of admission. Would you say that that's true? And do you have anything to offer on that?
Yeah, I mean, let me throw a question back to you, Shania. So, like, when you applied to college, and that was 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
you knew that you were going to apply to CS, I mean, did you have a sense that you knew that applying to CS was that much more difficult than other majors? What was the word on the street with you and your friends?
I think we kind of knew that applying for a major like computer science or, software engineering was definitely more competitive. So it would decrease your chances of, admission or at least admission for that specific major. But I think that now that I'm in college and I'm seeing every year, like the admissions rates are changing within majors and colleges, and then even meeting people in my university that tried applying computer science or now want to switch into it and they can't, I'm like starting to realize the extent of how competitive it can get.
Oh, so what I hear you saying is now that you're there, and now that you're in college, specifically UC Santa Cruz, and there's a lot of people there, you're seeing the demand within the school, seeing other people who want to transfer in, they can't, and they're stuck is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, and I don't know how it is for a lot of other majors, but I know like at UC Santa Cruz for computer science, even when you're accepted as a proposed CS major. So you're not guaranteed to still come out of, that university with a degree in computer science. You have to first clear like the declaration classes, like the ones you need to declare the major. And I've already started to see like people are kind of like dropping out, or if you don't pass one of those classes, you can't major in computer science anymore. So not only is it like difficult at the time of application, but also once you're in the university itself. So I think that, is definitely something interesting. And I wonder like if that, is applying with other majors, or if, there's some specific ones that are just significantly harder to get into.
You're living the reality of what is happening right now, which is that there is a flood of students who are applying into computer science. And I mean, here's the thing. I mean, in some sense, rightfully so. I mean, there is not another industry that is where like finding a job is as readily available and the level of pay that you would get once you come out of college is as high. And so, yeah, I had a student, one of my former students graduated from UIUC, computer science and stats major. First job out of college was working for Target, Target software development, and started out in like the mid 90s as a mid 90K as far as his first salary out of college, and that was in Minnesota. I mean, if he perhaps would have gotten a starting job at like Google or something here in the Bay Area, it might have been higher. So I can understand why everybody is flooding in that direction. And if you can imagine, colleges cannot keep up with the demand. Like you cannot hire enough professors, open enough class sections. You can't handle the demand. So invariably, something's got to give. So the with too many applicants, too few spots, I mean that's the admit rate's going to go down, and that's a part of the deal.
I have heard that there are colleges that don't take your major into account when you're applying. So that's not something I personally knew about, but I do remember like talking with my friends and other students, and some people say that there are colleges that major blind. So you apply and they'll accept you on the basis of your application rather than your intended major. Does that really happen? Like, is it possible that if I'm applying like as computer science, they're treating my application the same as maybe like, a student in humanities and just comparing that app versus the major? How does that work?
So I want to say this. I think the intention of the colleges is to not consider the major. And I think perhaps the philosophical foundation of how colleges want to treat education, I'll give them the positive intention that they want to really consider the entire student. They don't want to be obsessive about the major. They want to find the right fit student for their school. And so in my opinion, I think, colleges begin with the right intention. But the truth is that colleges also have budgets that they need to meet. They need to make sure that there are enough students in certain departments. If there's too many students in the department, that also creates problems for them. And so the reality is that even if you wanted to like not consider major, like you have to consider major purely from just a functional basis, purely from I just cannot put that many butts in so many seats, or I can't, there's too many, and let's say too many butts, right? For too
Yeah.
few seats, right? So this is where, a couple of examples like Carnegie Mellon's computer science admit rate is 7%, whereas that if you applied in as a bio major at Carnegie Mellon, it's around 22% if you applied in as a business major at Carnegie Mellon, which is actually a terrific business school, by the way. So, I mean, if you want to study business at CMU, is fantastic. 23%. I know a lot of students, they love UT Austin. UT Austin's CS admit rate, not public, but among all the counselors that, the network of counselors, the sort of presumed admit rate is below 10%. So somewhere around 9 to 10%, while the overall admit rate to the school is around 28%. And so if you're applying into CS, certainly it is, if you're just looking at your admission chances, it's a liability. Now, are there other schools in the United States where it doesn't matter as much? Absolutely. So, I mean, you're talking about liberal arts colleges and perhaps a larger array of less selective schools, then your major matters a little bit less. And, certainly there's those options. But if you're aiming towards more selective schools in the top 50 and you're applying in computer science, you should expect that the likelihood will decrease to some degree.
Yeah, and kind of like going into colleges that do take major into account, or at least are looking at it at the time of application. Do you think that it might be a wise decision or something for people to consider to apply for a different major than the one you want to actually study and pursue in college? I know a lot of people like make jokes. They're like, I'm gonna apply like, for English and then I'm gonna transfer into like neuroscience, like biomedical engineering. And do you think like that is something that's valid? Because I know that some colleges specifically do sometimes not let you switch into particular majors. So what is kind of the advice you have for people that want to apply for a major different than the one they actually want to study, just to increase their admissions chances?
Yeah, did you ever have that temptation, Shania? Like, were you thinking about, if I could just be a French major,
Yeah,
do your study abroad in
I
Paris, all that kind of stuff.
yeah, my brother, like, he is going to this year he's going to Santa Clara University for computer science, but at one point when he was applying last year, he was looking at like the admit rates for like UCLA, UC Berkeley, and I think he was like, oh, UCLA like has like a 99% acceptance rate for like Arabic language studies or something like that, because it's maybe not a major that is as sought after. And he was like, I'm going to apply that and then I'm going to switch into CS. So definitely, like, we've had those conversations for fun, but I wasn't sure if that actually is something people should or can even do to just increase their chance of getting into a particular college and then figuring out like the route of study.
So Arabic studies, that's a good move. Maybe I don't know, that's a secret move your brother is trying to figure out. But
Yeah.
perhaps to provide a little bit of transparency into the admissions process, our Illumin's president was a former UC admissions counselor. We have two advisors on Comet. One was a former Rice and USC admissions officer. Another is a former Stanford officer. So Stanford admissions person. So admissions teams are trained to look for essentially like students who are, like trying to game the system, right? So and here's the thing, like the schools are trying to admit students who have, a genuine interest in a particular major and who will also graduate on time. So this whole thing about graduating on time is a very important metric for schools. So if you come in and let's just say you want to be an Arabic major, but your entire profile looks like it's computer science. Number one, if you go into the Arabic department and then all of a sudden transfer out, then there's going to be some funding like budget issues for the Arabic department. Number one. Number two, will you be able, you inferred this earlier in this conversation, where will you be able to change majors? I mean, computer science is so impacted that changing majors into that major is going to be exceedingly difficult. And then number three, it's like if I'm the school again and you're spending 2 years in Arabic, or you're going to end up spending 4 years in computer science, when are you going to graduate? I'm not sure. So like they're looking for what they call CS students in like Arabic clothes or history, political science, whatever it is, looking for somebody who's trying to kind of game the system. So it becomes very disingenuous. And if I were to, if you were to think about any other kind of interview, you feel like it's disingenuous and you don't have a lot of confidence. It's not, you don't it's not endearing. You don't find yourself drawn to that application. So you gotta be your honest self. You gotta tell your honest story and go with that. So
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think like one route that I'm seeing more and more people and like some of my friends take is if you are applying for a particular major that you don't think you can get into like right out of high school at the time of application, or if you're still just like not fully sure and you're not ready to maybe go to like a 4-year university and make that commitment. I think a lot of people now are like considering going to community colleges. So, like in California, there's the tag program. So if you're like hitting a certain GPA, like you're guaranteed admission, like for a particular major into like the particular UC you've selected. So I think that's like also an alternative route a lot of people are considering now.
if I don't mind, let me comment on that real quick, because I think what is happening on the transfer landscape is actually very interesting right now, because in light of the pandemic, there's been like a decrease in community college attendance across the United States. And then me and you, we're currently in California. It is definitely happening in California. And the most states have a fixed amount of funding that is allocated towards specifically transfer students. And you see the CSUs, most public schools in the United States are in some sense under the gun to make sure that they admit enough transfer students. So if you can imagine that there's a decrease in community college attendees and transfer students, like if you're on the UC and CSU side, you're going to admit more. So we've already seen that happening this year, where students who we thought didn't really quite have the profile that should be admitted to like a UC Berkeley, UCLA, are almost all across the board being admitted to Berkeley and LA. So it's kind of a good spot right now. You want to go to community college for a year or two.
Yes, definitely. I think maybe I'll have to take a break from UC Santa Cruz now to figure out how to transfer into LA. So that definitely makes sense. And kind of now going into like what, majors are easier or harder to get into. I'm sure also like viewers are curious, like what are the specific majors now to kind of consider which have higher or lower acceptance rates? I know that even within the same college, like the selectivity is so different for each major. Like I remember like when I was applying and kind of to make myself feel better after some of my admissions decisions, I was like, oh, if I had applied something else, like I would have definitely gotten in. Like it was the computer science, it's so competitive. What would you kind of tell people on that, like, in the past years and kind of how numbers are changing with regard to, maybe what is getting more competitive or less competitive?
Yeah, certainly the simple answer is computer science and anything related to computer science. And I maybe have a few data points that perhaps we can include as a slide if you're watching the video. So, but like the top five majors at UC Berkeley in 2016 were computer science or electrical engineering, computer science, econ, business, and mechanical engineering. And over the course of 5 years, you see that shift. Computer science remains strong, econ and business sort of stick around, but you see cognitive science and data science start sneaking in 2018 and 2019. And then by 2020, you see data science essentially eclipse mechanical engineering and eclipse business. And business has always been super popular, but to see data science come in as sort of like this outsider, I mean, if you're looking at horses, like a horse race, right? And then on the outside coming in, um, nobody would have thought data science 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden, it's like a top four most popular college that has exceeded business and mechanical engineering. You're getting a sense of where this is all going. So really, the most popular majors are going to be, yeah, computer science first and foremost, data science, bioinformatics, which is a combination of biology and data science, cognitive science, which is a combination of psychology, linguistics, and computer science. And then you're also seeing people just combine computer science and linguistics. And if are writing your papers with ChatGPT or or getting whatever you're doing, good and bad, the foundational neural network language learning is all based in cognitive science and linguistics. And so these are all foundational and are going to be exceedingly popular over the course of the next, at least the next 4 or 5 years for sure.
Yeah, and kind of seeing like how, computer science has like, always kind of been like at least as of recent, like becoming a very up and coming major. I remember like my dad told me that he initially was not planning to major in computer science. He had applied as like an electrical engineering major. And his dad, so my grandpa kind of went to some of the college professors and were like, what is a major like my son can do to kind of make sure like he has a good future? Like, let me know like what he can do. And a lot of the professors were kind of like, oh, there's this like it wasn't exactly like a brand new major, but it was kind of new to a lot of colleges at that time that there's computer science. And so my dad, like in his college, he was actually the second set of students like to graduate with a computer science degree. And then I think now we're seeing that like every other student is trying to major in CS or some form of that. So why do you think that students then are all trying to major in STEM, and why is it becoming so competitive like compared to other majors? Within every college it looks like STEM is just getting insanely competitive and cutthroat. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what I said earlier, I still think it comes down to like a very lively job market. I think Gen Z, and Shania, would you consider yourself Gen Z? Maybe you're like,
Yeah,
I'm too old.
probably.
No, yeah, but the sense is that Gen Z is generally speaking like more practical, and there's a certain sense where, and maybe you can confirm this, Shania, that you're feeling like the previous, like you're coming out of a season of time that's very divisive. There's a lot of reflection on how perhaps the previous generation has totally destroyed the environment, and you got to take it upon yourself to make this world better. You got to take it upon yourself to do what's right for yourself and to make sure you can live and survive and do what you need to do. So students now have, I think, been exceedingly more practical in their choices. So computer science, getting that 90K job at Target, Target software development, whatever it is, I think that's certainly the biggest shift. Certainly, you have parents who are trying to influence their kids to go in a certain direction, and we don't need to talk about anybody's stories. Go to podcast number one. Refer to podcast number one. But certainly parents are wanting to make sure their kids are going to do fine and have a good job in the future. So certainly there's going to be some influence there as well. But yeah, I think with the onset of all the generative AI technology, the Bard, the ChatGPT, all the other the Chinese platforms that are also going to be coming out in the next few years, it's going to be wild. And so I think some of the other opportunities for other majors are gonna start standing out more. And the need to have somebody just code, I think that's gonna go away pretty quickly. And so maybe Shania, you can just zoom past your coding classes and get on to other things.
Just skip those.
Yeah,
I'll be
just
like,
skip
yeah,
those. Yeah, take a nap.
I
Use
have
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Like, I
exactly.
don't need this anymore. Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. Like one thing I would add, especially like you mentioned, sometimes being more practical is like I think at least for a lot of students that maybe have like immigrant parents or grandparents, or you're like to some extent coming from maybe less resources. My grandpa, he in India used to make 200 rupees a month as his starting salary, which today is the equivalent of $2.50, which isn't even going to get you like a small like Starbucks coffee, right? So I think like especially like as students now are seeing like okay, my grandparents or my parents kind of like are just making ends meet, and there's definitely like with rates and even the increases in like tuition and housing costs, like things are getting so expensive. It feels like I think a lot of people are like okay, like STEM or this specific major or career seems like it has better like financial opportunities, which is I think a lot of people like do consider. And I think like that kind of leads me into this question of like, what factors like should we be prioritizing when we're applying to college? There's obviously the aspect of like I want to make sure that I am pursuing something that I like, so I'm not, in a maybe in a career or a job which I'm like unhappy with for the next, 30, 40 years that I'm working. Um, there's also factors like okay, I want to be near my parents, or I'm sure a lot of people like listening to this podcast feel the opposite way. I know a lot of people that my brother's like yeah, I can't do 4 more years with you guys. Like I need to like go live away from you. So what are factors people should be considering?
Yeah, for your college major. Yeah.
Yes.
Your brother's like, I'm out. I can't do it.
I've done enough. Like I've done my time here.
I've paid my dues.
So
So I think with the whole aspect of college majors, and I want to say this, and this is having seen thousands of students over the years and tracked their progress over time, whether it's in college and in their careers. I'm still like big fans of my students. Like I'm always on their team, and I'm always excited about their progress and movement in life. The students always do best when they go with their passion and their curiosity, like how they're creative, And so I always tell students like you gotta begin with who you really are. So like if you're a graphic designer, you gotta own that. That's fantastic. And if you're like a Arabic student and passionate, harken back to your brother. If you love to study Arabic or you're into like political or military history or you're into engineering, always I feel like you always bode well, do better when you begin with your curiosity, when you begin with um, the disciplines that give you natural energy. So like always begin there. But have been advising this to students for the last 3 or 4 years, um, to always like take advantage of college and contrast your major with either something technical or either something in the humanities. So if you begin with if you're an engineering student or you're a computer science student, I would highly suggest to do like a minor or even a double major in like English or history or you can economics or something like that. And then, or if you're an economics major, or let's just say you're an English major, to contrast that by double major or minoring in statistics or computer science or something like that. And my my opinion, the next 10 years, the job market is going to be super dynamic. There's going to be a lot of industries that are going to get automated out because of ChatGPT. And like the need to even do like accounting has been like a mainstay for the last 100, maybe 1,000 years. Let's even put it that way. And we're at a point where ChatGPT can actually do all that for you. And so computer programming, accounting, a lot of these tasks can be automated, and you're not going to need that. But I would say the disciplines that train students how to think, like those can't be automated. And in most cases, those majors are going to be in the humanities. I'll throw something out to you is that Mark Cuban in 2017, Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, billionaire, tech billionaire, he says his big prediction is that in 10 years, a liberal arts degree in philosophy will be worth more than a traditional programming degree. So can you imagine, like, Shanaya, if you go back to your parents and say, I'm going to study philosophy. Mark Cuban says philosophy is going to be more important than computer science. And and what he's saying again is that artificial intelligence is going to start automating everything. And we're not going to need to do the most basic tasks. And knowing how to critically think and assess a global perspective is going to be way more important, way more valuable. So understanding how to use and implement technology, ChatGPT, how it's going to function in society, how government entities are going to legislate boundaries for technology, that can't be farmed out to ChatGPT. That needs to have critical thinking human beings to come in and really understand like how society is going to be formed. So, and even Mark Cuban in 2017 called it out. He says, "Man, this next season of AI is gonna blow our minds. It's gonna be way bigger than the iPhone, way bigger than the internet, and we're seeing it right now. Like even when we're seeing it. It's mid 20 like May of 2023 right now. It's crazy. It's already changing the world drastically. So he's saying philosophy. Let's do it."
Yes, no, that reminds me. My doctor actually, like, he told me that he started out as a philosophy major. And when his parents like kind of found out, they actually threatened to disown him and cut off like paying for his tuition. So he ended up changing into the pre-med track, and then now he's obviously, a very successful doctor. But I think next time I have a visit, I'll have to tell him like you should have stuck with philosophy. Like that's gonna, come in handy for you.
You
But
should have
yeah,
stuck with philosophy, doctor. Yeah.
you, yeah, like what are you doing here? Yeah, but I definitely agree. I think what I'm also like seeing it like you mentioned is, having like a more dynamic degree and having, a wide range of skill sets. Like at the beginning of my first year of college, my first quarter, I was in an introductory programming class, and like my friend was in the same class and she's a literature major. So I was like, what are you doing here? Like why are we, why are we in the same class? But I think like seeing that, like, even if people are studying, like, if you're studying like maybe something on the humanities, like taking something more like STEM based, and then if you're, like studying something more STEM related, you're, trying to still take like other writing or humanities classes. I think that definitely helps a lot. With, like marketability and just developing your skill set. So what do you think are some tips for applicants that want to just increase their chances of admissions overall, kind of, regardless of whether they want to apply for computer science at a college that has maybe a 3% acceptance rate, and even if you're applying like Arabic studies at, maybe a 90% acceptance rate, what are some tips to just increase your chance of getting into the college you want for the major you want?
Yeah, so I I would still, begin by saying begin with who you are and be honest with who you are. I also feel like your, your profile needs to match. Again, it's this whole thing of like Arabic studies and your entire resume says computer science. It's you look like a phony, you know. But the other thing is that if you're the window for this is closing a little bit because of the rash of applicants who are kind of applying into. But if you're in computer science, perhaps think about doing bioinformatics or data science or just statistics, and then combining it with like a CS minor if you want to, or even beginning with like say physics if you're an engineering major or engineering leaning major, and you begin with physics, and you could certainly like minor in computer science and certainly get enough coding to get a job once you get out of college. So I think like staying, like looking at some of the derivative subjects that are still core to your to your like desired major, but outside of just the computer science bucket, I think that may be a way to improve that. I think if you're a humanities interested person, but your parents are encouraging, or whatever verb you want to use in there to encouraging you to do computer science, own the humanities. And I would say right now is there's no better time to do humanities as it relates to getting into college than right now. Like if you think about, I mean, I don't want to, yeah, but I'll do it. So we had a student of ours who was a classics major, and classics is like, you know, certain studying some of the you know, like the historical literary figures, especially as it was rooted in sort of Greek mythology, and like it was a classics major and like was in the Latin club. There was like another like classics national, you know, organization she was a part of, and she learned Latin when she was in high school, so her profile very much lined up with classics. And if you look at especially a lot of the Ivy Leagues, they have large classics department because that was a classic, you know, department from a very liberal arts perspective, and so there's a lot of professors they have to support. So she applied in as a classics major, um, admitted to Dartmouth, Yale, Penn, and Cornell. And not admitted to Princeton. Boo-hoo, right? So it sucks. But her her profile, I say her numbers were like slightly lower, not substantially lower, but slightly lower than what we were seeing getting into Ivy Leagues. And so this is where I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you apply to classics, you're going to go to Yale. But you know, but this is a good time to be a humanities major. There's fewer of them applying in. Even Mark Cuban trying to encourage people to be a humanities major is not working. So if you're a humanities major, own it. That's going to be a good option for getting into where you want to be.
So, as one kind of like final piece of advice to offer our viewers and listeners here, who maybe are unsure of what major they want to choose, or still kind of in between deciding, you know, what they want to pursue in college, and how they envision that happening in their career, do you think that, you know, considering the job market and potential earnings while you're choosing a major, would you say it's more important, maybe, or equally, or less important than following your passion? I know you kind of mentioned like studying maybe a mix of both. So if you're passionate about, you know, one thing, and you want to again implement something more practical, maybe you can do that. But if people kind of, you know, sometimes have to make that choice between like their primary major, unless they're like really comfortable, you know, doing two majors, like what would you kind of offer as advice to them?
Yeah, I think that I do think students need to consider a job market, and it is, but I also want to acknowledge we are in a like we're in a pivot point in history right now, like literally right at this moment. And I feel like job markets are going to drastically change, um, yeah, substantially. So, and you know, and you could say, I think in our previous conversation, Shania, we had talked about healthcare. We had talked about just other areas that other than computer science that are going to be thriving over the course of the next 10, 20 years. So I think it's important to like be cognizant of a changing job market. But I still think you gotta own who you are. So I still feel like there are graphic designers, artists, and maybe I'm thinking about my wife, who's a graphic designer, but this is where UI UX design is the foundational skills are in many cases coming from graphic designers. And UI UX designers are in super high demand right now. So own who you are and begin with your curiosity. And then I would say you have to supplement. You have to supplement with that minor that hedges your bet to make sure that you are prepared and ready for a changing job market. So the CS minor, the statistics double major, if you're a humanities or creative major, and if it's the reverse, I feel like you got to be like a computer science philosophy Shanaya. So you gotta see what you can do to get that philosophy double major in there,
Yes.
and then really and really actually really train yourself to yeah, be ready for a changing job market and changing world. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And I definitely like the idea of kind of like making sure that you're developing and really working on like critical thinking skills and just kind of like being creative, because those are some things still that I feel like even AI, like at least as of now and hopefully for a while, is not like able to master at the level that like we can. So I definitely think that like, considering like logic and thinking and kind of going outside of the box, because again, like we like in any major, like especially important is like that skill set you develop. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this, and I really feel like I learned a lot. I hope the viewers did as well. Very interesting points on kind of like the impact of STEM now, and how it's definitely becoming maybe harder in a sense to get into, but how we can kind of like when we're applying, making sure that we're being authentic to our stories and skill sets, will definitely help in applying. So that concludes this episode of Comet's podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and gained valuable insights from our discussion. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this week's episode and share it with your friends and family. If there's specific topics you want to hear about, or even specific people that you want to see featured on our podcast, maybe outside of me and Elton all the time, feel free to let us know in the comment section below. Or you can also go to our website at www.applywithcomet.com/podcast. Our contact information will also be in the description. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on our All Angles podcast. Thank you.